Vayetzei, and he departed. What is that referring to? The end of last week's Torah portion, it described the way Jacob appropriated the blessings that Yitzchak wanted to give Esav, and Esav was intent on killing his brother Yaakov. So Rivka tells Yaakov he has to leave and take up residence with her brother Lavan in Haran. And then she tells her husband Yitzchak that she doesn't like the girls of Canaan, and Yaakov has to marry someone from her family back in Haran. So both of those reasons were given for him to leave. Number one, to escape the wrath of his brother, Esav, and number two, to find a wife. And on that note, the Torah portion of this week picks up, and it says, Vayetzei Yaakov me Beer Sheva. Yaakov left Beer Sheva. Vayelech, and he went Harana, to Haran. So the question here is asked, why does it repeat itself? It could have just said, Vayelech Haran, and he went to Haran. Obviously, if we know he lived in Beer Sheva, and then he has to go to Haran, it's obvious that he left Beer Sheva. You can't go to another place without leaving the place you were at before. That's a question that many of the commentators ask, and Rashi gives an explanation. This teaches us that the departure of a tzaddik, a righteous person, from a place makes an impression. For while the righteous person is in the city, he has an aura. He generates light. He is the guiding light, and he is its honor. When he departs from there, this aura departs, its guiding light has departed, and his honor has departed. In other words, what Rashi is saying, that when Yaakov left Beer Sheva, it wasn't just him physically leaving, he took some of that light and honor and aura with him. Another explanation given is that there were two reasons why he left. Rivka told him to leave because she knew that Esav wanted to kill him. So Rivka says, you have to get away from here. I don't want to lose you. But Yitzchak didn't tell him to leave for that reason, because Yitzchak was not aware of the extent to which Esav wanted to kill Yaakov. Rivka tells Yitzchak, I can't take it that he should marry one of the girls of the Canaan. And the Yitzchak summons Yaakov, and he tells him, don't marry a girl from Canaan. Go to Padan Aram, to the house of Besuel, the father of your mother, and find a wife from one of Lavan's daughters. He doesn't mention a word about the danger posed by his brother Esav. Most likely, Rivka didn't want Yitzchak to feel troubled by this, so she gives him another reason for Yaakov to go. So the Torah wants to tell us that Yaakov, when he left Beer Sheva to go to Haran, it was based on two reasons. Because out of respect for his father and mother, he wanted to focus on the fact that on one hand, Vayetzei, he had to leave Beer Sheva. He had to get out of Beer Sheva. That was to honor his mother, who was concerned with his life, that he shouldn't be harmed by Esav. So he had to leave. It didn't make a difference where he went. As long as he left Beer Sheva, he was out of danger. But then he also wanted to honor his father's request that he marries a girl from Haran, daughters of Lavan. So he sends him to Haran, and he goes to Haran, which gives us another important lesson, that sometimes you have to go from point A to point B. And the reason you have to leave point A is because point A is not safe. It's not a secure place for you. And you have to get out. If it's an emergency, you have no choice. You have to get out, even if where you're going is not distinct, is not clear, is not perhaps the best place in the world, but as long as you get out. But the truth of the matter is that a Jew, even when he has to leave a certain place, it's never that I have to leave and it makes no difference where I go. A Jew has to always be focused, even when he has to leave a certain place, he has to be focused on his destination. Where am I going? What is my next mission? I remember hearing a story of a shliach, of an emissary of the Rebbe, who was sent to Morocco. This is a chassid from Russia who knew very little about Morocco, didn't speak the language, but the Rebbe sent him there. He went, and the Moroccans were not happy with him. They accused him of something, and he was forced to leave Morocco. The first thing he did, as soon as he got out of Morocco, he calls up the Rebbe's office to ask the Rebbe, where should I go now? And I believe the Rebbe told him, go to Belgium. If I'm not mistaken, this chassid was my daughter-in-law's grandfather, Reb Sadia Liberov, who was originally in Morocco, and then he went to Belgium, one of the most celebrated chassidim of the past generation. At any rate, a Jew has to know, yes, I have to leave this place, but that's not what the focus is. I have to leave, and I have to take care of my life. I have to respect what my mother, Rivka, tells me I have to leave, but ultimately I have to follow what my father says to know what is my destination, what is my mission in life. One thing about this parsha that is unique is that there are no paragraphs. It's one long paragraph. In the Torah, the only type of demarcation where something ends and another thing begins, you don't have any periods or commas or colons or semicolons, no punctuation whatsoever. What you do have is empty space. It's either a psucha or a stuma, two different forms of empty spaces, whether it's a whole line, whether it's just a few space, a little space within the line. But that tells you that the paragraph has ended. And the reason for these pauses, you could say, Rashi tells us in his commentary on the book of Vayikra, that when Moses was taught the Torah, God wanted to give Moses time to pause, to reflect in what he had learned, to digest what he had heard from God. Now this parsha Vayetzei is unique, that it has no pauses. There is no empty spaces. There are no it's all one long paragraph. The Balkore, the one who reads the Torah, it may be a challenge for him because it's hard to find where you begin and where you end because there is no demarcation of that. What is the significance of that, having it one long paragraph? So one of the Hasidic works known as the Sfas Emes explains that where was Yaakov, where was he coming from, and where was he going? He was coming from Beer Sheva, which is a city in Israel. And where was he going? He was going to a place, Haran, which is outside of Israel. So even though he was leaving Israel and he had a mission and he was going on that destination, he never lost sight. He never paused, you could say, in which time he was no longer focused on the place from which he left. His entire 22 years of leaving Haran, leaving Beer Sheva to go to Haran, he never lost sight of where he was from. He always knew that he was from Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. As Jews, even though we may not be living in Israel geographically, but we never lose sight of the fact is that's where we are, that's where we live, that is our home. And for thousands of years, even though we were in exile, Jews never forgot the fact that we are from Israel and that Israel is our home. That's the message of having no pauses, no interruptions. His mind was always focused 24/7 on the fact that he was from Israel and that ultimately he would return. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev asks a question. Usually when the Torah describes someone leaving Israel, going elsewhere, the Torah would use the expression Vayered, and he descended. because Israel is the highest of all lands, which means that Israel is higher than the areas around Israel, Haran among them, but also spiritually, Israel is the holy land. So any other place that you go, you're going down, you're declining, you're descending. Here it doesn't say that. Even though he left Eretz Yisrael, it says Vayetzei, and he left, not Vayeru, and he went down. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev says that Yaakov, even when he left Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, he took Israel with him, which ties in with the Sfas Emes, that he never lost sight, he never paused, he never interrupted his focus on Israel. So in that sense, that's where he was. The Baal Shem Tov tells us that where is a human being situated, not necessarily where his physical body is situated, but where your desires are, where your will is. If you want to be in Israel, then you are essentially in Israel. And when we focus on Israel in our prayers, especially, and we're facing east, in America we face east because that's the direction of Israel, that means that we are there. That's where we reside. Now, we only do that when we say our prayers, and the rest of the time we may not be focused on Israel. Well, Yaakov was always focused. He never lost focus, and therefore, even when he was out of Israel, he didn't descend. He was still in Israel. Now, the Torah tells us he went from Beer Sheva in Israel to Haran. Haran is somewhere in Syria, Turkey. Wherever it is, it's outside of Israel. But he didn't go straight to Haran. For 14 years, he took a detour, our sages tell us, and he went to study in the yeshiva of Aver. Now let me give a little bit of an explanation what that means. Contrary to what most people think, that the Torah was only known to the Jewish people after Mount Sinai, when Moses brought down the tablets and he taught the Torah that he heard on Mount Sinai, and of course they heard themselves the Ten Commandments. No, that's not where the Torah began. The Torah was there before the world was created. Torah preceded creation. The Torah was the blueprint of creation. Now, there were people before the Torah was given formally that were aware of the teachings of the Torah. For example, Noah was told to take on the ark 2 of the non-kosher animals and 7 pairs of kosher animals. Now, kosher and non-kosher is something that's in the Torah. So obviously Noah knew something about the Torah. We also know that the patriarchs knew the Torah. Abraham knew the Torah, and they kept the Torah to the extent that was possible in those days, before the Torah was given formally. That means that this knowledge of Torah was revealed by God prophetically to certain individuals. And we're told that the 2 most notable individuals who studied Torah and taught Torah was Noah's son Shem and Shem's grandson Aver. And they established an academy. So when the Torah tells us in last week's portion that Yaakov was a man who dwelled in the tents, it's referring to the tents of Torah. Whose tents were they? The tents of Shem and Aver. Shem, Noah's son, and Aver, Shem's grandson. So here Yaakov, Shem was no longer alive at this point. Yaakov is leaving Beer Sheva, and he decides to take a detour, and instead of going straight to Haran, he says, I'm going to take a little pause and study Torah in the Academy of Aver for 14 years. What was the significance? Why did he go to the academy at this point? If he wanted to study Torah, he could have studied Torah before that. And presumably he did study, probably from under the tutelage of his father, Yitzchak. This was a special detour. Why did he have to take this detour? So, some commentaries explain that Yaakov, when he left Beer Sheva, he didn't leave penniless. His father was very wealthy, so he took a lot of wealth with him, just like Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, when he went to find a wife for Yitzchak, he took all the goods of his master Abraham with him to offer it in the lieu of marriage with Rivka. So Yaakov also went loaded with merchandise, with jewels and whatever. Yet when he comes to Haran, he's penniless. What happened when Esav discovered that Yaakov absconded? Esav sent his son Eliphaz to murder Yaakov. And Eliphaz catches up with Yaakov, and he tells him, my father sent me that I have to kill you. I don't want to do it, because Eliphaz grew up in the house of Yitzchak, his grandfather, and he had a little bit of sensitivity. He didn't want to commit murder, but he says, I have no choice. I have to listen to my father. Because Esav was very good about honoring his parents. So if Esav honored his parents, he probably transmitted that value to his son Eliphaz. So Eliphaz says, I have to listen to my father, but I don't want to kill you. So Yaakov says, you don't have to kill me, because you can just take everything I have, take my jewels, take my money, and a poor person is as good as dead. And therefore, you could tell your father that you killed me. For all intents and purposes, I'm dead. And that's what Eliphaz did. And Yaakov is now penniless. He just has bimakli. I just crossed the Jordan with my staff. That's all I had. I had nothing else with me. Now that he was penniless, he decided, how can I go look for a wife in Haran coming without anything? He realized that he's not going to be able to impress anyone the way Eliezer was able to impress Lavan with his wealth. So he decided, I'm going to take a detour and study some Torah. But the problem is, did he think that by studying Torah for 14 years and still being penniless, he would be any better off? So the Chido, one of the great Sephardic sages, explains it very beautifully, and he says that ideally a person, which comes first, Torah study or marriage? So it depends. If you're well-to-do and you could afford to take off time to learn Torah after you're married, because you don't have to work hard to support yourself, so then first get married and then study Torah. But if you're poor and you get married, you're going to be busy day and night supporting your family, eking out a meager living. You won't have time to study Torah. So the poor person should study Torah first. When Yaakov left Beer Sheva, he was rich, so he planned to go straight to Haran, because he didn't have to worry. He'll study Torah later. But when he became penniless, he said, oh, now I have to learn Torah because I'll never have a chance later. One may add another explanation. Yaakov was going to a place that was not a very hospitable place to spiritual spiritual values. Yaakov was going to the house of Lavan. Lavan was a scoundrel. Lavan was an idol worshiper. Lavan was not the right influence. Lavan personified the worst things that we have in exile. If a person, and now what is he going to be doing there? He's going to get married to Lavan's daughter Rachel. This union represents the ultimate union, spiritual union, that will produce the 12 tribes that will be the genesis, the nucleus of the Jewish nation, to whom the Torah will be entrusted. And he realized that I'm not ready for that union. I need to prepare for it. And when he left Beer Sheva, he didn't feel he needed that, because he was always basking in the light and the warmth of his parents, Yitzchak and Rivka. But as soon as he left, even though he was always focused on Israel, but nevertheless he felt that he's going to have to contend with the exile conditions and try to create a spiritual energy. He felt he needed the study of Torah. And that's the lesson for us, that we are in an exile. And in order for us to appreciate the coming of Mashiach, when godliness will become fully revealed, in order for us to appreciate that, to be prepared for that, we have to fortify ourselves with the study of Torah. Now Jacob, on the way, he falls asleep and he has a dream. And in the dream, he sees a ladder situated on the ground, climbing up to the heaven. And angels are going up and angels are coming down. Well, first of all, if the angels are in heaven, they should be coming down first before going up. So Rashi explains that there are two kinds of angels. There are angels of Israel and angels of outside of Israel, of the diaspora. Different kinds of angels because there are different kinds of territories. So the first thing that happened is the angels that were escorting Jacob as he was still in Israel, they went up. They were finished with their job. And then a new set of angels, the angels that are diaspora angels, they came down to guide him and escort him. What that tells us is that God always sends messengers. Angels are godly messengers to assist us. And there's a different kind of assistance in Israel, a holy land, and different kind of assistance in the diaspora. And the Holy Land angels cannot deal with the negativity of the diaspora. We need special angels for that. The story is told that one of the great Hasidic masters, known as the Ruzhiner, he was a great-grandson of the Maggid of Mizrich, the successor to the Baal Shem Tov. And he was a child prodigy. When he was a little child, and they would learn Chumash with him, the Torah with him, he would ask all of Rashi's questions without having learned Rashi. He was so bright. And when the teacher came to this story about the angels going up and coming down, he expected little Yisroelik to ask Rashi's questions. Why are the angels going up? They should be coming down from heaven. And he didn't ask the question. So the teacher says to him, little Yisroel, you didn't ask Rashi's question. You should have asked the question, why does it say the angels are going up? When it should have said the angels first come down. And his answer was, why would I ask that question? This was a dream. Dreams don't have to be consistent. And that's a very important message as well. Exile is compared to a dream. We say that in the Psalms, referring to the time when the Jews came back from Babylonian exile. They returned to Israel and they said, Hayinu kecholmin, we were like in a dream. A dream is a confused experience. You can be in two places at the same time. You can go up before going down, even though you're coming from up there. Dream is a symbol of golus, of exile. And Jacob was having a dream that was a symbol of exile, and a symbol of exile because the Midrash tells us that the angels that are going up and down are a reference to the four different exiles the Jewish people would have to go through: the Babylonian exile, the Persian exile, the Greek exile, and the Roman exile. And those angels are going up, that they're on the ascendancy. These exiles control the Jewish people, but they will then come down, they will falter, they will collapse. So in Jacob's dream was a dream that represented exile, and in exile there's no rationality. It doesn't have to fit into any rational system because the whole concept of exile is irrational. What do I mean by that? Irrational. Why would God want to put us in a situation where we can't see His presence, where God is hidden? Why would God want us to be in a state where we lose sight of what's important in life, where we're confused? It's a riddle. We don't understand why God wants suffering in this world, which is what exile is all about. It's about spiritual and even physical suffering. Why does God want that? And the answer is, well, through the suffering we'll grow even higher. But God doesn't have to make us and help us go higher through suffering. He can make it happen without the suffering. And whatever answer we'll give, there'll always be another question that follows. God doesn't have to, He's not limited. He doesn't have to follow any special rules. God could have made everything perfect without anything lacking, without the suffering and the pain. So the whole concept of exile is irrational. We can't understand it. When Mashiach comes, maybe then we'll understand why exile was necessary. Only then we will be able to fathom something that's unfathomable. So that's the idea that the ladder is the symbol of the dream of Jacob, the symbol of Golus, the symbol of exile. Jacob was being told about the future, that there will be an exile. But even in that exile, We then go to the other interpretation. We will be escorted by special angels. That God will protect us and preserve us and will survive in spite of all the attempts of our enemies to destroy us. We will still survive because we have that special protection with those angels coming down from heaven. Then we have the very famous question. Yaakov works for Lavan, and he promises that he's going to marry Rachel. You see, the Midrash tells us, and Rashi quotes this, that Yaakov and Esav were twins. Rachel and Leah, the two sisters, were also twins. And people in the family were saying that they're going to marry one another. They were cousins, but they were going to marry each other. So Esav would marry the older daughter, Leah, and Rachel and Yaakov, the younger son, the younger brother, would marry the younger sister, Rachel. So when Yaakov first sees Rachel, he kisses her and he cries. He was destined to marry her. So he works for 7 years so he could earn himself the privilege of marrying Rachel. And in the end, Lavan tricks him and gives him Leah. And when he complains about it, he says, well, we don't marry off the younger daughter before the older daughter. And if you want my younger daughter as well, you'll have to work another 7 years. 7 days after the wedding with Leah, Yaakov marries Rachel, and he pays his debt by working another 7 years. Okay. The problem is, Yaakov here has married 2 sisters. And in the Torah, there's a commandment, it's one of the 613 commandments, that a Jew is not allowed to marry, a Jewish man is not allowed to marry 2 sisters as long as they're both alive. Yes, if one is married and the wife dies, the husband can marry the wife's sister. But as long as the sister is alive, you can't marry her sister. Even if you divorce one of the women, you can't marry the sister. So the question is, how could Yaakov have married both? So the answer simply is, well, the Torah wasn't yet given. There was no such commandment yet. The problem is that Rashi tells us, and it's based on the Talmud, that Yaakov observed all the 613 commandments. He kept all the 613, and one of them is not to marry 2 sisters. So how do we reconcile that with the fact that he married 2 sisters? Ramban, Nachmanides, the 13th century sage, says that rule, that concept, that the patriarchs kept all the 613 commandments is only true when they were living in Israel. Since Israel has a holier atmosphere, it's a holier place, they had a higher standard. But when they were outside of Israel, that standard was relaxed. They didn't keep all the 613 commandments when they left Israel. Since Yaakov was now not in Israel, he was allowed to marry both wives. And then the explanation why Rachel died, when did she die? As soon as Yaakov returned to Israel, that's when Rachel died, because that was the land of Israel where he kept all the 613, and that would preclude him having been married to 2 sisters. But Rashi obviously doesn't accept that, because Rashi says that Yaakov, in next week's parsha, when Yaakov returns, he tells Esav, I lived with Lavan, and the word for living is Garti, and Garti has the letters that add up to 613. And he was giving Esav a message that I lived with Lavan, but I kept all the 613 commandments. So according to Rashi, he kept all 613 even when he lived with Lavan outside of Israel. If that's the case, how could he have married 2 sisters? And the Rebbe addresses this question and gave 2 answers. One answer is, what is the reason why the Torah does not allow you to marry 2 sisters? So the Torah hints to the reason. When the Torah says don't take a woman and her sister, the Torah adds the word litzror, to become rivals. To become rivals. What does that mean? That when you are married to 2 wives, they become rivals to each other. There's a lot of enmity, there's jealousy. And God does not want that two sisters who have a natural love to one another should develop a feeling of jealousy and hatred towards each other. If that's the case, Yaakov said, it doesn't apply to me. Why is that? Because how did Yaakov be tricked into marrying Leah? Didn't he realize, in fact, that he did realize, and Rachel realized that her father Lavan, would try to trick Yaakov. So what did she do? She and Yaakov made up certain signals. That would be the way he would know that he's marrying Rachel, not the other sister. But then when Rachel saw that her sister Leah was going to be humiliated, that she's going to be exposed, she had such pity on her that she gave away the signals to Leah, which means that she gave away the opportunity to marry Yaakov, which was the dream of her life. She waited for this occasion for decades. And she was willing to sacrifice everything precious to her to avoid causing her sister embarrassment. Yaakov said, if that's the case, if Rachel went to such an extent, there's not going to be rivalry between them. There's not going to be enmity between them. Therefore, I can marry both. Then the Rebbe gives another answer. And the other answer is, Yaakov did not have to keep 613. Abraham and Isaac and Jacob did not have to keep 613. They chose to do it. They volunteered to do it. Hurting someone's feelings and betraying them was something that they were obligated to keep. That's an extension of the 7 Noahide commandments, that you can't just go and hurt someone, cause them embarrassment, cause them pain and anguish. He knew that if he was going to stay married to Leah, and he would, even if he divorced her, it wouldn't help, and he couldn't marry Rachel, that would devastate Rachel. He promised to marry her. To keep a promise was something he was obligated to do. When you have a conflict between something you do voluntarily and something you're obligated to do, the obligation always trumps the voluntary gesture. If someone has a job that he's getting paid for, and then he wants to volunteer at the expense of his job, that would be unethical. But he's volunteering to do good work, to do good things. You do that at your own on your own time. Don't take it out on things that you're obligated to do. So that's why Yaakov said, yes, I know I wouldn't want to marry two sisters, but I have no choice. I have to marry Rachel. And therefore, I am no longer bound by this restriction that I can't marry two sisters. And that's why Rashi, when he says he kept the 613, he doesn't say he actually kept them. It says he guarded them. It means he didn't violate them. Because he did it, because he had no choice, it wasn't a violation of that law. And therefore Yaakov was justified in staying married to marrying Rachel, in spite of the fact that he was already married to Leah. One final point. Yaakov, when he had to work for Rachel for 7 years, it says these were like a few days because of his love for her. And that's counterintuitive. If I want something very badly, I want to marry someone, and I'm told I have to wait 7 years, then what does that mean? That means that it's going to be like an eternity. I want to get married right now. I want this good thing right now. So it should have said the opposite, that these 7 years were like 70 years. Instead, it says because he loved her, these 7 years were like a few days. And the answer, briefly, is that for Yaakov, marriage was not a physical thing only. And primarily, it was a spiritual union of two very powerful souls that would prove to be the progenitors of the Jewish nation. These were the two holiest people in the universe. And their souls are going to unite to create a surge of the divine energy that is unimaginable. This was the ultimate spiritual union. And every day that he was working for her, he was experiencing a little bit of that spiritual energy, Because when you prepare to do a mitzvah, it's not just preparing to do a mitzvah, you are already part of that mitzvah. Although it's not complete, you're part of it. And every day that goes by that you're preparing, it becomes stronger and stronger. Like we count the Omer from Passover to Shavuos, we count the days because we're anticipating eagerly the giving of the Torah. We count, today is day 1. The next day we say today is 2 days. Today is 3 days. We count up because every day as we're preparing to get the Torah, we're absorbing a little bit of that energy of Torah. And until we reach the level 50, then when we absorb the Torah in its entirety. Same way over here. Every day he was preparing to marry Rachel. By working for her, he was experiencing the spiritual energy of that union between himself and Rachel. And therefore, it was exciting. There was such excitement. It was like a few days because he was enjoying it so much. It was so blissful for him. Same thing could be said, and we're waiting for Mashiach. Even though we're in exile still, and we still have negative things happening in the world, how do we generate simcha? How do we generate joy? Because we are preparing for the redemption. Every day that we prepare, every day we do a mitzvah, we have in mind, I'm doing this mitzvah to bring an end to the exile, getting out of exile and coming to the land of Israel with Mashiach. Every day that we're preparing for it, we're enjoying some of that future in the present. And that's what generates a feeling of joy and happiness. And every day that goes by, we become closer and closer, and we absorb more and more and experience more and more of that bliss. May we soon see the unfolding of the messianic process that will be given the entire bliss of the redemption, and we won't have to prepare anymore. We'll be going higher and higher, closer and closer to the ultimate goal of Mashiach.